Welcome to the Voice of Thai podcast, a space for stories, insights, and conversations that uplift the profession of teaching and inspire positive change in international schools. For over 40 years, the International Educator has served this community through recruitment resources and a dedication to amplifying the voices of international educators around the world. Welcome back to the Voice of Thai podcast. I'm really excited to have Mark Weber here. Ty recently published an article from our recent Getting the Jobs survey about sort of the shifting nature and sort of landscape of international recruiting, whether it's from the school side or specifically in the article, the data was really about job seekers. And so when I thought about who I wanted to chat with about this, I wanted to reach out to one of my colleagues in the recruiting sphere of things. And I selected Mark Weber because I think Mark has been doing this for a long time in recruiting. He does a great job of helping schools and supporting teachers individually and moving forward in their careers. So I want to welcome Mark from Weber's Ed, who was actually one of the first people I think I talked to when I first got into this position with Ty. You've always been very supportive of our work. And even though we do similar work, you're like, we can do similar work and we can really support each other. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you, Stacy. It's an honor to be here. And I also love what you bring to the table for recruitment and have enjoyed and posted several of the articles that y'all post. So,
yeah, I think this is really like with the newsletter, it's really a crowdsourced, endeavor in terms of people submitting, perspective pieces and news pieces about what's going on in their school. But with the Voice of Thai, we're really trying to use the podcast, really trying to use the articles in that series to kind of like mine some really important veins, like in issues in international schools. And I really have seen recruitment and job seeking in particular as one of those really like deep veins that we need to explore, because it's my impression, and this is sort of what I want to get, from you is, in the article, one of the things that I'm saying is that sometimes like it seems like being qualified is no longer enough. That was a very strong theme in the data that we had and the feedback that we had from people. And we had over 350 people take the survey. And so this came out was one of the strongest themes is sometimes being qualified doesn't seem like it's enough anymore. So I'm curious from where you sit and who you serve and the people that you're supporting in Latin America, does that fit to you? Does that theme stick with what you're seeing with the people that you're working with?
yeah, I mean it does, but I'm not exactly sure it's true. And so I think about that. I think that one of the issues that's coming about is that people have to prove, are we frozen? People have to prove that they are qualified. I think qualifications still matter. It's always going to be a big deal. But I think that also, like you said, and I think this kind of feeds into what you were talking about in the article, is that schools seem to be taking longer to make their decisions, and I know that makes educators nervous. In fact, I just got an email this morning about someone that says, I haven't heard back in a week, what should I do? And so they are getting nervous about that.
Well, and
So
I think that's an interesting observation, because I mean, I think this process as a job seeker is so high stakes, right? It's like, where do I live? Where do I work? Who's my community? If I have kids, what kind of experience are kids going to have there? And if a school that you're really interested is taking longer, and then there's maybe a school that wasn't your first choice and there's a job offer on the table, like it just seems like it's increasing the kind of drawn out process is really increasing the stakes, especially for teachers.
yeah, I think that's the dilemma. Is some people are saying, should I take my second choice? Is the bird in the hand better than the one
Yeah.
I may or may not get later on down the road? And so I can understand people being nervous about that, but I also think it feeds into your point about that the schools are trying to do more evidence-based
Mm,
recruitment. And one of the areas I did want to mention that I think is really important where the schools are taking more time and making a huge impact is in childhood protection. I think that
yeah.
everybody probably that we know that's got any sanity at all will say that is our number one goal for everyone, for recruiters, for teachers, for administrators, everyone. And so those are the kind of things that I'm hoping that are coming about. But I also think I can understand why candidates get nervous if they're not being, called in within a week or whatever. And so that kind of does make a difference.
So you kind of mentioned something that, makes me think about like the extended timelines, the time that it's taking. Maybe people are being more rigorous, in their processes. That's all good, right? Those are positive things for our profession and putting the best people in front of our students. But what I also really heard in a lot of the feedback and the data is, again, it's like the high stakes of that waiting and then the perception that their experience isn't counting as much. Like there's a strong theme, and I think it's in the article as well, that people feeling like, is my experience counting against me because I have so much experience? And is it slowing down the process because do they want to pay me this much? Do they want to give me tuition, for two kids? It's always been to me like the formula. It's like, a teaching couple with a couple of dependents with some experience, like, where do you want to go? That seems like from the data, people are feeling like that is becoming more of a challenge as well. So, like, even shifting from, yes, it's great that we're taking longer to do these things, but are there some other things that are factoring into our decisions about who we're really considering?
Yeah, Stacy, I'm totally with you. I read that a lot that people say, "Oh, they're passing me over because I have too much experience and they don't want to pay me for that experience." I'm not sure I totally buy that 100%. Because like, schools have this table where they start either at year 6 or year 7 or
Yeah,
whatever it is. And so they're not really paying you for the full amount of experience. And I do think that's an issue. But also, one of the things that's changing too is we're seeing that the salary and benefits packages are getting slimmer and slimmer. You mentioned, married educators or partners that have children. That used to be like the bonus deal,
right.
because you get two candidates living in the same house and they have children and also a partner or a spouse that's going to make them more stable and more likely to stay at the schools, especially with children, because a lot of people don't want to move until their kids are going to make a
Yeah,
transition like to middle school or high school. So that keeps them out of school for 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever it might be. But it seems like that's getting ignored. And I know particularly in Latin America, that's something we struggle with is getting 100% of the subsidy for the student's tuition or more than one
mm,
student's tuition. Like people, I see people coming in with 3 and 4 and I even saw one with 5 kids, and I'm like, man, I hope you find something, because I'm
yeah,
really concerned about you and your kids. But it is one of those things, and I think that this is a lot of this is coming, and we talked about this in our other discussion before about the for-profit nature of
yeah,
schools. A lot more schools are becoming for-profit, and I think that this is a big part of what's setting the tone in the education market, and they're also setting the tone for what is competitive now. And I think
yeah,
we're going to keep seeing that. But I also think there's a balance there that needs to be struck because at some point, if you're ignoring the really qualified, experienced teachers, then what's going to happen to your education programs? We all know the answer to that. And so I'm hoping that that will strike a balance. Like this, people will vote with their feet, and if this
right.
doesn't have the educational background and experience that's needed or that people want, then people are going to walk.
I say this more, I think, anecdotally from even some of my personal relationships. Do you feel like this was a tougher recruiting year, like across the board? Or like, is that just a perception that we're all, I just know that I'm, hearing the stories of like applying and not hearing back and like never moving forward. I know a couple people taking a year off this
Mhm.
year because they were trying to navigate and move up in their career, and they were just finding that so, difficult and not wanting to take the bird in hand situation and think more long term about their career. Like, from what you're seeing, and definitely the data shows us the perception was this was a tough year. What do you think? What did you see? What's your experience on your end look like?
Yeah, I thought it was a weird year
Okay.
because what happened was it seemed like recruitment got started and then it stopped for a while. It kind of froze for a while and there wasn't much. And then it got started again and it stopped again. And I think we're kind of in that third wave now. I think you've talked about the waves of recruitment before, as I have tried to do as
Yeah.
well, because both of us are tired of hearing this nonsense. All the good jobs are gone by December.
No.
Not only is that not correct, it's a dangerous myth to perpetuate because people are taking jobs because they're worried that the
Yeah.
market's going to run out on them. And this is something because I'm old school, I've been around the international market since 2000, and also before that was an educator back in the United States. People are breaking contracts because they took a contract, then they found something better. I don't know why they're still searching, but it's in our nature to keep looking. And then
Yeah.
they find something better and they break a contract. Back in the day, if you broke contract, game over. You might think
Right.
the world is a big place, but the international schools market, these people know each other and they will spread the word. But now that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. It seems like people are just, it's a free for all. They could, if you find something better, well, ta-ta to whoever I signed an agreement or a contract with. We don't. I don't play like that. I don't like that. And
Yeah.
we've really tried. We've had to ban a recent educator that I really respect and really like, and I think she's an amazing educator because she did this. I mean, and she did get a much better job. But that's the problem with perpetuating this myth that recruitment is over by December or January.
Right. Yeah. Well, I also think, you were talking about the for-profits and, the explosion of the number of schools, the consolidation of schools under the umbrella of a nonprofit. I sometimes feel like the nonprofit organizations are an entity unto themselves. And then you've got, all these small independent schools. And that, as that dynamic changes between the kinds of places people are looking for jobs, like we're not as networked as we used to be. Like I'm networked in a certain school type, but I'm not networked in some of these for-profit organizations. And so maybe that's actually giving, teachers like things that we would have like never have done or never really thought of doing. Like that's maybe why you're seeing people getting away with breaking a contract and taking a better contract because we have so many now systems like in the environment that they don't necessarily talk to each other that much.
Yeah, and
Would you
I
agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think there's a particular reason for that. And I don't want to put a blame here, but I'm just saying it's the nature of the business. These school groups that own like 100 schools or whatever it is, they're very insular in the sense that they are doing everything in-house because they have economies of scale to do
Right.
that. Their recruitment is in-house, their sourcing is in-house and all that. And so we're not seeing that much networking happening because they're doing it on their own, and also because they're competing with the other groups, they're trying to keep the trade secrets from each other. And so I think that is one of the issues why we're not seeing everybody being as familiar with each other as it
Right.
was before. But I also think something else is going to come about. And I'm already hearing this from my candidates. I hear a lot of candidates asking, they're like, look, I don't want to go to a for-profit school. And there's a lot of reasons to not go to for-profit schools, salary and benefits being one of them. But it also, still remains like, will that have a knock-on effect to the not-for-profit schools? but I think candidates are really trying to seek out not-for-profit schools, and I'm hoping that will give the not-for-profit schools an advantage that they may not have had in the past, you know. So we'll see, I guess.
Well, and I think let's kind of shift to talking about like salary and benefits, being an impact again, like massive new systems that maybe have a different pay scale and a different approach to salaries and benefits. Different schools can start out in different places based on what's the tuition, that you charge in your home country. I remember my first place that I worked, the government capped the amount of tuition. So that like they weren't really operating in a free market, they were operating in, a fixed market. So there was only so much that could be charged, and actually in a country that people had a lot of money actually. And so that depressed, salary and benefits. When I'm out there as a teacher, knowing that there's sort of a depression of salary and benefits, what do you tell people who are sort of getting started in this? I mean, I know my first international teaching job, I made less than I made in my public school job in California. Yes, I had housing and things like that, but I was also like taking a longer view on this. Like, is there kind of a short-term, long-term view to take on the whole salary and benefits aspect of this, like from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's also a bit complicated because like the way that you just said it is exactly what a lot of candidates are saying. Wait a minute, I'm going to take a pay cut here and make less money than what I made back home. But yes, but you can't just compare it like that. You've got to look at the cost of living. That's on our job advertisements. If you look at them at the bottom of every single one of them, I have the Numio cost of living calculator there because
Yeah.
particularly that is an issue for us in Latin America. And so I need people to understand that, but also at the same time, people need to understand if they have a mortgage back home or really high
Yeah.
bills or student loans or something like that. Maybe right now Latin America is not the place for them to do that. But going to the point that you made about the long-term perspective is also what else happens in Latin America is it's easier for you to get a job in an IB school and get that IB experience because it's a little bit less competitive. It's a little bit easier for you to make that transition into administration because it might be a less competitive
Mm,
market where you're not making that money. So go and crack that egg somewhere where it's not as competitive for you, get that experience, and then move on to wherever you want to move on later on. And I think your view of that, like looking at it from the long-term perspective,
yeah.
that's exactly what you've got to do. And I think that, that's one of the things that I think about with educators in general is what is the trajectory of your career? What do you want it to be? I mean, obviously, things change all the time. 25 years ago, I would have never thought I was going to be a recruiter, but
Yeah.
here I
Me either.
am and totally loving it. Yeah.
No, it's funny. I feel like in some ways, like, like you having been in this profession, international education a long time and been a recruiter, been a job seeker, like the work that we're both getting to do, like you get to bring all of those perspectives, into play. And that's where I really kind of think about, one of the things I wonder, and it's not necessarily in the data, but how, is it like what percentage of people are gunning for the exact same schools, right? There's a small category of schools that we can name from around the world that like, all right, affordable place to live, good package, stability, things like that. And then it's like everybody wanting to go to the same places. And like, yes, it's so competitive, but is it so competitive just in certain brackets? And, not to like rank them that this being better than another. I mean, I think we have to look at schools and evaluate them like really holistically and what they can offer. And I just wonder how much time we spend thinking about the nuances, kind of what we were talking about. Like, all right, salary and benefits, short term, long term, like, is the school that I'm looking for and I'm devastated that I didn't get to, like, have I done enough to get onto the top of their stack of the resume? Because this is one of the other things that really came out of the data is people just feeling like they can't be seen and that they're applying to schools and there's 250, applicants for that one job. And I know you and I work with a variety of kinds of schools, and that's not the story for every school. But I think, candidates are applying to those schools
Mhm.
and they find out there were 250 resumes and they just feel like they can't even be seen. So, like, what do you do? What do you advise for people? I mean, I know what we're saying at TIE around evidence-based portfolios, that these are ways to help you demonstrate your impact. But what do you think candidates need to know about clawing their way to the top of the stack so that they
Mhm.
even get considered?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what you said is totally spot on, and I think you have a very good understanding of how candidates think about stuff. And I see this all the time where candidates self-select in a way that they go, "Oh, well, I'll never get that job. I got the best job I ever had just out of random dumb luck. I got to go work at one of the very top schools in Southeast Asia in Malaysia." It just like after my second year of being in international education,
You don't even
and
know at that point what you've gotten. Like I always love that teacher that like it's their first job and they're at this school and they're like they don't even know what they managed to get.
yeah, well, that is exactly what happened. I was in the bathtub when this head of school called me I hope you don't mind me mentioning the school, but it was ISKL in Malaysia. And then I went in the next day, to my school that I was working at in Venezuela. I was like, has anyone ever heard of ISKL? And people were like, yeah.
Uh,
Why are you asking that? I said, well, they called us for an interview and I think they're going to hire me. What do y'all think? And they're like, oh my God, it's an amazing school.
yeah.
And it did turn out to be that. And I just had the thing was, I had the right qualifications. And that is one of the things I think candidates need to think about. Stop going, I get applications for stuff that I'm like, where did you ever imagine that you were qualified for this job? And maybe they are, but they're not really telling the story of the trajectory of their
Mm,
career properly. And this is where all of the things that you mentioned in the article about things that candidates can do, creating these portfolios
yeah.
and having this evidence-based profile that people can look at. I think that that's what people have to do, and educators need to really look at themselves in the mirror. I think you're wasting your time if you're going after jobs that you just have no business interviewing for. And if you don't know the difference there, that could be a problem too. And so that's something that I see. And one of the things that you talk about, is are this digital presence, these portfolios, are they important? I think they're important whether the school looks at them or not. Well,
Mm.
another thing I do is I help like heads of school find jobs around the world. And one of the things I have them do is I have them write a document on what is their position on AI and what would they have it do or not do in a school. What is your position on technology? Where would you use technology? Where would you not use it? And those kind of things. Because even if the school that's interviewing them doesn't look at those documents, they've thought about it,
Thought about
they
it.
know what their position is, and they can speak confidently
They're
about
ready
that.
to
And so I
respond.
think it's important to do no matter whether anybody's looking or not. It's like doing good things. Do it whether people are looking or not.
So you just brought up something I think also really important to talk about, and that's the time issue. That's something that we heard from people over and over again is that like this is like a full-time job. On top of the full-time job, I already have and the life that I live and the people that I support and take care of in my life is with I mean, is it becoming like too much? Like, are we like just super inefficient? Are we not valuing the right things, not selecting the right things? I mean, I know people get frustrated when they go to apply to a school and they've already applied and put a resume with you and with me and maybe another place. And then they go to that school to apply directly for a job and they got to do the whole input again. Like, where are the inefficiencies in the system that really maybe aren't serving schools and aren't serving candidates? Well, because it just seems like time is becoming the increasing input for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally spot on with that. But I think what the problem is look at it. We have so many toys to play with right now.
Yeah.
So people are using those things and they're trying to figure out where they are actually helpful and where they are not. Some are just going to be toys that people like to play with because, hey, technology's cool, you know. But some of these things can be helpful. And I don't think it's anyone's fault. I just think that we have so much out there. But the point you made about this becoming a full-time job, I mean, I can't tell you how happy I was reading your article. I'm like, if this doesn't, make the call for why people need to work with recruiters, nothing will. This article really, I felt like really supported that. And I know you, Stacy. I know you act with a lot of integrity, and I know that Ty really has a strong voice about, equality in education and those kind of things. But I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that they do need some support. I do think that there is the need for them to have that. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of people have a negative perspective about recruiters because maybe somewhere down the road, they're not wrong in some cases, but
We all
maybe
have our
somewhere down
stories.
yeah, maybe somewhere down the road they got shanked by somebody and or they got burned and they just
Yeah.
it's still with them. I understand that. I think the thing is about finding the right recruiter for you, finding recruiters that you feel have the right level of integrity
Mm,
and responsibility to help you do what you do. And that's, of course, what we try to do in our
right.
business. And I know several other recruiters that really do make that kind of effort.
Because I definitely do feel like the whole, whether it's on the recruiting side and looking at candidates or candidates having to put in so much, time and effort. Like, it used to be that if you were in a certain part of the world, recruiting was pretty, like, there was a nice little tight bow tied around the box that it happens from December to February. And I mean, I know, having been an administrator in an international school, that, when I left a few years ago, like, it was kicking off in September and we were going into May, because changing class rosters, maybe the school was growing, like whatever it might be, and having to add new positions, it becomes like so much more labor intensive for everything. And I don't know the answer to it, but I do feel like it feels like that's like a nut to crack, whether it's, for schools or for candidates, like, where can things be more efficient in the system? But then again, like, the system is in this huge environment and there's so many systems,
Mhm.
so maybe it is what it is, but it's one of the things that I feel like is contributing to the kind of overwhelming nature of, like, so much effort, so much time, so little perceived response and interest. And that
Yeah.
feels so out of balance.
Yeah, but it's true, and it just seems natural that it's going to happen. It's so easy to apply for jobs now because of all the technology we have, and that is what, then you've got the decision makers at the schools that are trying to sort out 200 to 500 CVs possibly. I don't think it's always like that, but I do think it is like that. I think one of the weird things is education is you have schools crying that they can't find the teachers that they need, and you
Yeah.
have teachers crying that they can't find the jobs that they want. And I don't know where that comes in, where those things meet each other and solve themselves. But I also think it's just the time that we're in right now, the period that we're in right now, where there is so much out there. I mean, think about this also, and I'm a bit older than you, so maybe I remember this, but
Probably
that
not.
but when we first came into international education and you went to a new school, they were like, oh, yeah, you got to write the curriculum. We don't have the curriculum because the curriculum traveled with the teacher. And then schools
Yeah.
stopped doing that and realizing, wait a minute, the curriculum is our property. You wrote it on our time. Turn that
Yeah.
stuff in and let's put it on file, and you're seeing that more. So, but that kind of same thing is also happening in recruitment too, where they're saying, no, 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 you've got to check the boxes and you've got to fill in the blanks for us before no longer, because also it used to be if you were a native English speaker, I'm sorry to use that term in this podcast, but if you were a native English speaker, hey, come on over and meet my boss at the bar and we'll get you a job, and it was like that, and that's no longer the case, I think, and I hope it's not, because I do
Well,
think what's
and
good.
I think that's one of my important, like, that's what I like about chatting with you. I think that's one of my important kind of takeaways is that, maybe all of the work, the time, the length of decision making, like maybe this is more of a feature of like professionalism than it is like not paying attention to people who are interested in your school. I still think we could get better at letting people know that the job is no longer available. The position is closed. We're sorry, we're not interviewing you. I think we should be more kind and polite. I think than a lot of treatment that teachers receive in this process. But I hear you in saying that like maybe we're getting better at some of those systems of looking at people and deciding with a real rigorous lens who we're going to engage with and we're going, to talk to. That's a real takeaway for me is that maybe this is an aspect of us becoming maybe more maturing, as an industry and you're not just getting your job in the bar anymore. I mean, I know I went to a school because I got some extra drink tickets one time and that like helped me make a decision to go somewhere. And so, I mean, I think I like thinking that like we're moving past that. We're moving beyond that.
That's going to be the headline tomorrow. Stacy Stephens got a job from giving away drink tickets.
It's one of my best recruitment stories. It's how I ended up in the Middle East and
Yeah,
loved
but
it. It
but
was
you're
great.
you're you're totally spot on. It's going to take us some time to sort out where the technology is useful and where the technology is not useful, And I think that that's something that's got to come about from both ends, not just the schools, but also from the educators. How many times have you read people like, I applied for 170 jobs and I've only heard back from 3 of them, and I'm like, you found 170 jobs that were actually a fit for you. I find that remarkable. I'm ready to hire you as a recruiter because I think that that's one of the things and I understand why. I think people are panicking. And so they're
Yeah.
like throwing the spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. But at the same time, they're not only wasting the recruiter's time or the school's time, they're wasting their own
The
time.
own time.
And the candidates I work with, I'm like, look, stop messing about. That's not your area. Stay in your lane, or at least what your trajectory looks like, that where you should go. And let's focus there because you're not going to be happy with that other job. I worked outside of my field once, and that was when I decided to leave education and start my business.
Well, Mark, this is why I wanted to chat with you. Like, I really always love your observations. I love how directly you state them and to the point they are. I really appreciate that because I think you are really working really directly with a lot of candidates. So you have a really great view on this process and what we're seeing. And it's affirming to me that the data and the perspectives we're getting back from people who are taking the time to fill out the story that like it matches with some of the things that you're seeing and experiencing. And I think you have a really lot of good perspectives and advice to give people. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to share this with us. And do you have any kind of last parting sage comments or advice for our listeners on the Voice of Thai?
No, I thank you too. I mean, I love what y'all do. I'm always posting y'all's articles
Yeah.
because I find them very valuable, and especially for our candidates in our schools. And so I do think that's important, and I appreciate that. And I think the only way to be about recruitment is to be direct with people. Tell them the
Yeah.
good, the bad, and the ugly. There was an article that just came out, I believe it was in Ed Week, where they talked talked with one of the recruitment agencies, and they found out that one of the things that really put teachers off is when they're talking to technology and not talking to
Mm,
real humans. And you know, that's our whole battle cry, is keeping the human in human resources, you know.
yeah.
And that is also my big fear of what might happen to recruitment, is that we're going to turn too much of it over to
Yeah.
technology, and it's going to become inhuman, you know, and that's the shift that I'm worried about. So and that will be the question in the future, to shift or not
Yeah.
to shift. But let's try to keep people talking to people. That's why we
Well,
get.
and again, it's like what puts the best teachers in front of our students. And like that's where that like human element, like how do you really get to know people? How do you get a sense of people,
Yeah, and
in
even if
order
it's
to ensure
online
that?
like this, that's better than, you know, not having it, or it's better than
Yeah.
an email or a WhatsApp message or whatever, to get to know people. Because like I can sit here with you now and almost
Yeah.
feel like we're in the same room together. I can't wait till we can do this in VR, but you know.
I know. Be great. All right, Mark, I really want to thank you for your time. I'm very appreciative. And I have a feeling we'll be talking more again when we do these surveys again.
I hope so, Stacy. It's always an honor and a pleasure to talk with you, and I appreciate your time as well.
Thank you so much.
Have a great week.
Thank you for joining the Voice of Thai podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and our newsletter so you don't miss out on all of the stories and resources from the international schools community. Check out the show notes for links and more information for this episode. You can also find us online at www.thaimonline.com and in all of your favorite social media places.